Welcome to another episode of the Legacy Builders Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle McGee. Today, we're diving into the world of architecture and construction with someone who was practically born into design build. Our guest, Jason Langkammerer, grew up in Berkeley, surrounded by historic craftsmen and Victorian homes with a father who was both an architect and a contractor. That early exposure gave Jason a unique foundation, equal parts drafting table and job site. After studying in Los Angeles, where modern design thrived outside of historic contexts, Jason returned to the Bay Area with a mission: to blend modern architecture with the rich, character-filled backdrop of historic neighborhoods. Today, as the founder of AT6, Jason leads a design build firm that integrates both architecture and construction, ensuring clients enjoy a seamless and trusted journey from concept to completion. His hands-on approach keeps him involved at every stage, ensuring that each project reflects not just modern lifestyles, but also the stories embedded in the homes themselves. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jason, you're in San Francisco. We were just sharing offline, just spent some time over in California last week. Beautiful area. Sun was shining. Not so much today, huh?
True. Yeah, we're supposed to get some rain today.
Yeah, very good. Well, interesting background, and I'm certainly interested to hear more. If you could give the listeners some context, a little bit about your upbringing and your journey, and then what you're currently up to today.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, my father was also a licensed architect, licensed contractor, had his own firm. A lot of what he didn't really love dealing with clients. So he sort of created a company where he did more small development projects, and those projects got bigger and bigger. And then he tried to build a big apartment complex in downtown Berkeley. What was it? Mid 80s, early 80s, money fell through. Anyway, he had to shift gears and moved into actually being an expert witness for construction litigation in sort of the last part of his career.
Oh, interesting.
So I worked for him both, kind of growing up, even just as a kid, going to the job site on a weekend, and he gives me a nail and a 2x4 and a hammer, and I'm building the house, and I'm really off on the side. And so I had that experience. And then when I went to LA for college, I did come back and work for him for summers. He was in the expert witness work there, and that was pretty boring. You were building reports on, leaky housing complexes, that were built in the early 80s. And it was just, he hated it, but it gave him some money to be able to get back into some development work, kind of flipping houses in a not just lipstick on a pig type flips, but additions and rebuilding homes. So I never wanted to be an architect growing up. In fact, I think for a while in my rebellious teenage years, it was the last thing I wanted to do. I feel like I might have blurted that out at one point. But I saw architecture through how he talked about it. I didn't see it for myself. It was just like, oh, okay. That's what my dad would say about that house. That's what my dad would say about that house. Right. So then I went to undergrad down in LA. I worked in law firms for a little while. And then in my mid 20s, just started to see the LA architecture and started to find an appreciation for it. And ended up, strange story. I had my dad, of course, helped me buy a house down there after the earthquake in '94, because prices came down. He saw it as an opportunity. He couldn't turn off his little developer mind. So helped me buy a house down there. And one day, as I was kind of tired of the whole law firm stuff and thinking like, maybe I need to make a shift, I had a business card in my mailbox, and it was from a local movie studio or TV studio. And they were looking for a location to film some pilot for a TV show. And they've said, I think you're the front of your house, the front yard, like, we'd love to do it. And I'm like, fine. And, they paid me, I don't know, $6,000 for like 2 days or something. And back in 1995 or something, it was, it's significant money for a 25-year-old. So I ended up taking that, quit my job, and I signed up for this summer architecture program at a local college. And then didn't realize that program, they kind of hand plucked people to go into their graduate program. And so like 8 weeks after this whole thing, I was signed up for a 3.5-year graduate degree in architecture. And then, moved back up here, worked with my dad again, back to flipping houses. We would draw up a house for a few months in the office, and we'd go out and build it for a few months, and we'd come back and draw the next one. Did that a couple times. And that's kind of, then I ended up starting on my own from that. But yeah, I definitely came, and I didn't take over his practice really. I kind of started my own thing, which is sort of interesting. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree is definitely a cliche that fits for me in my professional life.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great story. And it's interesting. I think of, it's hard not to think of my own childhood, and we have a lot of similarities, but what came into my mind as you were sharing that is how much we are just ingrained in our adolescence and our early childhood years, and we're developing our subconscious without even knowing it, right? So you're getting drugged to job sites, you're listening to your dad speak, right? You don't even realize it at the time until probably now or, later in life, though, that it's like now you start looking through this similar lens, right? And then you have an opportunity, you jump on it. So first thing that came to mind, but also just so we understand, close the loop, what does your firm look like today?
So we are 8 people. We are what you'd call architect-led design build. So when I started my own firm, it was architecture only from 2003 to 2011. It started out as like a sole practice myself, JP Lang Design. And then in 2005, had a friend from grad school who moved up from LA to San Francisco. We started AT6 Architecture. And then 2011, he left in 2009. I was actually, just to get through 2009, 2010, I was like framing a house for a friend of mine,
Oh, wow.
just to make do because there was no work.
Yeah.
And then in 2010, started the ball rolling of let's do the construction as well. And part of that was necessity in that recession, right? It was like, all right, I don't have that many clients. Instead of getting, 10% of the value of the design fee on the value of what they're doing, I know how to build stuff. Let's start building it and get all of the all of the revenue in. Yeah. And so it was a little bit of by design, but I had thought about it, even before the recession, like at some point doing both. And so 2011 kind of was the first time I got a project. Then for a long time, we did kind of anything, right? I would design only, I would build only, and I would do design build. And then we realized that the design only didn't make any sense because the profit margins are small and it took so much of my time. And so the first thing we said was, look, we don't do design only anymore. It's either design build or we're doing construction for other architect friends of mine. And then I would say, God, it's probably now 10 years ago. We just said, look, we're just going to put all our eggs in this basket of design build. And we feel like we're better designers when we know we're going to be the builder, and we're better builders when we're the designer, and the client experience is better. And our sales pitch of like having this great client experience only works if it's like one team that's accountable from beginning to end. So we've probably given up some growth opportunities by focusing on that, but we've definitely had a lot of success. And so we're focused on the larger. In San Francisco, you don't build new homes anymore. Like you just can't demo an old house. It just doesn't really happen. We built 2 custom homes outside of the city, but really our bread and butter is large additions and remodels. Trying to stay away from the kitchen and bath world because there's, that's a niche that's well taken care of, again, by design build. So we have this kind of weird niche that is larger projects, but people think, oh, I'll hire an architect and then we'll hire a contractor. So we're trying to figure out how to fit that niche. And again, I think it's a tight niche, but it's really successful for the clients that we work with. And we celebrated our 20th anniversary in July. So something's working.
Yeah, that's huge. Not many people can say they've been in business 20 years. I think that there's a very important principle there, and it's hit to home really hard in the book Good to Great, and it's trying not to spread yourself out, right, and be all things to all people, and it's narrowing the focus and being known for that niche, right? And it sounds like you guys have done a tremendous job, right, of not trying to spread out too thin, laser focus.
Yeah, the way I've thought about that, and it's something I read, I think even before I read Good to Great years and years ago, was you can have a company that survives, you can have a company that thrives. And
Mm.
survival was us taking all the jobs that would come our way, right? Design only, design, build, construction. That was us just surviving, like bring the money in because we need the money, right? We need the money to survive, as opposed to now we're thriving because we know this is what we do well. We do this design build on certain types of projects, and that's what will allow us to thrive. So we try and say no to everything else. And that has, I mean, again, I think there is some growth opportunity we've given up, but I've never been in this for like, oh, I want a really big company, right? It's really about the quality over quantity.
Sure. It's interesting you say that, like the power of saying no. And looking back over the past couple of years in my business journey, it's every time that I've been scrambling for like guaranteed revenue, like, it's like, oh, I don't know where the next client's going to come from or the next check or how we're going to do this. And I say yes, it's burned me, right?
Yep.
Because
Yep.
they're not in your core genius zone, like what you do, what your team does. So it distracts you from the big picture vision. It typically ends up lingering way longer than you ever anticipated. And so, I've got a project that's 2 years in the making, and it's it sounds like something better for you, honestly, because it's a really historic home, complete, gut remodel with an addition and a pool house. And it's a beautiful project. And it's honestly badass. However, that's not what we're the best at. That's not what we're
Right.
good at. And so we've had this thing kind of lingering, and it's a disservice to the client, right? Like you're
Yep.
not the best at it. You don't know
Yep.
all the things, but we're in the apartment business now and have been in the spec home business. That we can tell you, we can build a house in 90 days and got a good warranty process, all these things. So you're really doing a disservice to the end client, by trying to
Right.
be all things and your team and yourself and everything else.
To that point too, Kyle, like that's actually really helps me in my sales pitch. Like you hate to say no to people just because you don't want their job, right? This job's not big enough for us, or the budget's not big. Like that's kind of I wouldn't say it's disrespectful to the client, but the client doesn't take that very well, right? Oh, I don't have enough money for you. My project's not big enough for you. Like, and so in my sales, conversation to say, hey, your project's great. It's just not a good fit for us. Actually makes me feel really good as a salesman to I'm serving that client and I'm not making them feel like you're lesser than, but you're just different. And like, that's fine. But it's just, here's some other names of other companies that you might do. And I really liked, I hate to be a dead end for leads. I always, instead of it's just, hey, no, not for us, go find somebody else. It's like, hey, tell me more about your project. It's not right for us, but tell me more. And then here's somebody who I think would be somebody you should reach out to. And now the one thing I'm starting to do is actually when that happens and they're like, oh, this is really great information. Thanks so much. I'm asking for that Google review. I hate it, but it's like, I got to get more Google reviews, right? It's like, hey, if you felt I helped you in your journey, like here's our Google page.
Throw me a bone.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I'm probably different than a lot of the people listening because I'm intimately familiar with the custom home world and the home building industry. And custom homes are like the bane of my existence. I can't stand them. I think that it is honestly, God bless you. Like it is one of the most difficult things. And especially when you get into these high end, because you're dealing with a different type of person, right? That is typically a high performer, type A, there's certain detail oriented that can be, first of all, how do you set the proper customer expectations up front? And then how do you get amiable to different personality types when you go through this custom home building process?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, especially around here with the tech world, there's billionaires walking down the street all the time, right? It's sort of the weird, we're in that bubble of a lot of the founding, people of these huge companies live in our area. I've stayed underneath that zone of construction, and I'm happy to. Most people are like the senior VP as opposed to the C-suite person, or like a senior project manager, like a double income that's a project manager for a tech company, and they're both making really good incomes, and they have, RSUs. They've got, some stock options and things.
So high end, but not ultra high end.
I call it luxury. Yeah. We're not doing jewel boxes is the way
Yeah.
I kind of put it. Like, it's not show homes. It's like most of our clients have families and they're beating their homes up. They got kids that are running around. And I do think that being design build, there is like an efficiency kind of built into that, even if there's actually some really positive parts of it. And I feel like sometimes maybe I'm self-selected out of that high level who want the best architect and then the best builder. And like we're both, and so almost by default, we can't be the best architect and the best builder because we're trying to do both, but we can give you the best experience, right? Best client experience throughout the process. And we have capabilities like any other architect in the city and capabilities of any other contractor, but we're also not building at $2,000 a square foot, which is what a lot of that stuff is north of. And, we're still at, $1,200 a square foot or something. Like it's still crazy money out here. But there's
crazy.
People that are,
I know, right? Florida, and
I know, right? It's crazy.
Is like,
yeah. But there's also people that are building it, 700 or 800, and we're trying to convince our clients to pay more for us. So I think I've had, sort of one real client that was in that world, and it was a rocky road. And it was all about expectations, and the project kind of really took too long. That was probably the biggest thing, is it just kind of everyone got exhausted. And so that was tough. But yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about client expectations. We talk a lot about, setting them and then resetting them and being honest about changes and just, somebody said we're a peddler of facts, right? Don't feel like if you give them a budget that you don't think they're going to like, that they're not, that it's a personal attack or something. It's just facts. This is a budget. Yeah. And so if you feel confident that way, no, it's fine.
I was just going to say, if we could go a little bit deeper on some of these, like hard conversations and challenging clients, like what is your personal take besides like being super transparent and upfront? Like I literally just got off the call with a project manager and we're trying to, hand this home over to the client, and last second, we can see roller brush marks on the paint, and it's like, well, we've walked this home 12 times with you guys and now we're talking about this, and so it can be very challenging, right? Different circumstances, different people. How do you go about just like going through these again, and this might be a repeat, but just going through these like changing personalities and different expectations?
Well, I think a lot of it is making sure you know what your process is, and the process obviously has the client's concerns front and center, but that you're owning the process and you're not all of a sudden like the tail's not wagging the dog, right? The client all of a sudden starts saying things and then you start chasing client satisfaction and you get off of your own process. Like that's happened to us where it's like, yeah, this client asked us to fix this and fix this and fix this. And we just started fixing things. And we look back and going, none of this was in scope. Like, whoa, hang on. And then you start saying no. And then the clients, but you fixed the last three, so the tail wagged the dog, right? We didn't own our process. The other thing that I think is important when you do have a process is you need to do it right. Like you can't slip. And so like there was a PM that worked for me a long time ago, superintendent really. And no, sorry, he was PM. And he was a very personable guy, really gregarious guy, great guy. And he would tell the client would say, say towards the end of the rough-in period, sheetrock's coming up in a couple of weeks. And he'd say, hey, remember we talked about like putting that little arch detail on this thing? It's still framed as square, right? And he'd be like, yeah, trust me, we got it, right? And they're like, okay, great, he's got it. And then they come back, the next week and it's still not framed in the arch. And then the sheetrock goes up and it's still not framed in the arch. And he's like, no, try, like this whole idea of like, trust me, I got it. But when you don't, all of a sudden they are going to pull out their microscope and or magnifying glass, and they're going to look at everything. And so 100%. If you can stay ahead of that and be like, I've got it, and then be true to your word that you came back and did it. And we trip up all the time, but I think we're getting a whole lot better at that. And we have again, our process is like, we have multiple people going out with checklists at those rough-in milestone walkthroughs so that like the superintendent gets forced for the tree syndrome, right? And they're like, they don't see the arch because they're looking at everything else. But when the designer comes in, or I come in, or my ops manager comes in, they'll be like, wait, I think I remember in a meeting, we were talking about making this an arch. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. So those kind of things are important. The other one that just came up yesterday was an issue where, so we have these beliefs we live by. It's like 9 sayings. And one of them's put the company out of business with your generosity. So basically the idea is you want to meet any moment with the client, especially moments where the client's a little frustrated, surprising them at how generous your response is. So we had an issue. It was a change order. There were some last minute things, some low voltage stuff that needed to go in before this cabinet. It was out of scope, but we didn't do the planning part of it very well. And it happened all of a sudden, right as the cabinet was going in, it was like a media center cabinet. It was like, oh, we need more stuff back here. And so the electrician spent a bunch of extra time just like kind of figuring out what needed to happen. And they billed us for it. Like, I get it. We didn't get them out early enough to plan it. And so we got this change order, which we felt was legit to pass on to the client, but we also added our markup on it. And like, we talked about it. We're like, should we add markup? And we're like, well, do you think they're going to be okay with this markup, or with the amount of this change order? And I think the consensus was, yeah, I think we talked about it. I think they're fine. Send out the change order. They're like, why is this so expensive? So of course we walk it back. We take our markup. They're like, fine, that's great. Thanks very much. But we weren't we should have done that before. We should have surprised them with that change order, knowing it was coming, and go, hey, look, we felt like we're culpable in this. We're not going to give you our markup. Instead, they had to complain, and then we backed up. We didn't gain any like value or trust with the client. They're happy but they're not happier than they were the day before. Whereas if we had done that first, if we had surprised them with the generosity of saying, hey, look, we're going to wipe our markup because we feel like we're a little culpable on this, then they would have liked us even more than they did the day before. Now they're just like not unhappy, right? It's the difference between happy and not unhappy. And I think that you have to be really aware of that meter. Like, are you really making your clients happy, or are they just not unhappy?
Exactly. And there's both of these examples that you gave, the only thing that was ringing in my head was trust, right? As soon as you start dissolving that trust, and people, they're hiring you, you're the expert, you have this concierge level of service, and whatever you do, like anybody in any business, as soon as you don't follow through on something or don't over communicate something, then all the other bells start ringing. And then we're starting talking about brush marks on the paint, because of this,
exactly.
and this, and it opens up this huge can of worms. The second thing I think about is this a transaction, or is this a long-term relationship? And you can look at through this lens as being someone in business for 20 years. If you look at each client as just squeezing out everything you can get, you're not going to get these reviews. You're not going to get the referrals. You're not going to get the more business. Your subs, like everybody kind of won't want to build this long-term relationship with you, right? And so if you're in business, in any business, whether you're home building or any other business, try to see the forest through the trees, right? And think about long-term. I was in real estate, selling real estate, and it was amazing to me how many realtors would just lose a long-term client or relationship over like 0.25% at the end of the transaction, and then they're fighting tooth and nail for every dollar. And it's like, hold up, that client would lead to 5 more if you would just treat them right. Instead, you're trying to fight tooth and nail over these $1,000, and you lose your trust.
One of those other beliefs we live by, the first one actually, is be an agent, not a gatekeeper, which is exactly that. It's be relational, not transactional. And it's really hard because we are doing a business transaction. Like, that is the fundamental relationship we have with our clients. And so it is transactional by nature, but you want to be the agent. You want to be the person that's there, their advocate. You're on their side of the table, especially we're in a position like we kind of we can and have to be that, because we're not able to say, well, the drawings weren't right, or, hey, they didn't build it according to the drawings. Like if we miss something in the drawing because, there was some meeting and the client said, hey, I want to picture frame trim the windows, or I want a sill instead of picture framed. and we know that we just forgot to do it in the drawings and the picture framed, like we're going to do that at no cost to the client. Whereas if an architectural set of drawings were shown with a picture frame and they wanted sill, the contractor is going to charge more. So like we have to have that advocacy for the client and that accountability. But at the same time, back to the thing we were talking about before about owning your process, we also are a business, and we have to know that we have to say, hey, this is going to cost a little extra, right? Because this is different than what we had been talking about. We're here for you. We're advocating for you. We're also a business that needs to be sustainable. And that's
for profit, not a nonprofit.
And that takes time. That takes like career experience to really feel comfortable in those conversations with a client in the moment, especially when the temperature is a little hot.
Yeah. For anybody that has no clue about construction, it's like the ultimate blame game. You know, the contractor's blaming the architect's blaming the contractor, electrician's blaming the plumber and the sheetrock guy, and it's always somebody else's fault. You know, so you guys are taking a little bit of that blame out when you can't go back and forth with contract and plans, contractor.
And the one good thing, though, I think, and especially residential remodeling, is even clients know that it's not a perfect process, right? There's mistakes, there's things, and so we're open about that. Like, hey, you're going to live through. We're going to do everything we can, but I guarantee you, at one point, the last person leaving is going to forget to turn the hot water heater back on, and you're going to have a cold shower. And I apologize in advance. We're going to do everything we can not to have that happen, but it just happens, right? Literally, things like that happen.
It's construction. It's not a perfect world. On this podcast, I don't only like to talk about business. So I'd like to shift this conversation a little bit and start talking, some personal stuff. As a leader of a company, you've been in business 20 years. What are some of the like non-negotiable personal habits that you have in order to be operating at your highest and best version of yourself?
I play golf on Friday afternoons every week. So that noonish or so, we have our PM meetings in the morning, and then everyone knows I'm off, and actually my staff is great because they're actually really supportive of that. And even, the Slack messages that come Friday afternoon seem to be much less than normal. They know that that's time for me. I've got, 3 kids, and one in high school, 2 in middle school. And so I rarely work on the weekend. I've just never really worked on the weekends. I've always felt that the work-life balance is important. And just have built a company. And that's probably also part of the growth thing. Like I've had different priorities. And so, I've been around for 20 years, and, we're a lot bigger company because we're only design, and then we're build, and, the numbers have gone up. But honestly, I'm kind of selling the same amount of work as I did 20 years ago. Like, it's just, we've been more efficient. We've been more profitable. We've obviously gone into construction. And so that's added, moved the decimal point on our revenue. But yeah, for a long time, I didn't even, people who worked for me, or even consultants that I worked, or colleagues that I worked with, were like, hey, what are your revenue goals? I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean revenue? Like, I don't know. I don't care, kind of, in a sense. As long as I'm getting my, my paycheck that I need for my life, I didn't have any sort of, I'm sure I have plenty of ego built into my company and my professional success, but it wasn't money based. It wasn't revenue based. We'll put it that way.
Yeah. And so you take time to yourself with your Friday afternoon golf. Another core belief that I have is, everyone's definition of success is a little bit different. I believe that success starts at the home. And so you can't have a successful life without a successful family life, and business is secondary to that. What are some of the rhythms that you have within your family in order to keep you guys kind of tight knit?
One of the rhythms is that I cook and I drop off in the morning. So it kind of already establishes bookends to my business day. So I drop the kids off. My wife usually picks them up, but I'm also the cook. So I have to be home at 6 or so. And so that already just by default makes my business day, 7 hours or 8 hours or something like that at most. And, just all the activities and things like that. Sunday night dinner, like I got a freshman, my oldest one's a freshman, and he's starting to get more social and more outside. And I keep saying Sunday night dinner, we're always at home, and I'm going to make a dinner. We're not going to, the DoorDash thing is an emergency throughout the week, but Sunday night, we're always going to be here. And he fights that, but he also is there, and he wasn't a couple times. And I'm like, look, give me your phone. If you're not going to be here for Sunday night dinner, then I get your phone. Right. So, not too much Tiger Dad kind of stuff, but really just kind of consistency. My dad was remarried, and I have a half brother that's 13 years younger than I am. And so when Pete, my brother, was in high school, and I was now, I had moved back from LA, and it was 30 and working for my dad. My dad he was more of a workaholic, I'd say, than I am. He was always at home until Pete left for school in the morning. And that was just his thing. He's like, I want to be there, because oftentimes Pete's off doing his sports or whatever, but like in the morning, I'm going to be there. And so just that kind of routine and that prioritizing family life over work in whatever ways you can, is, I think, and it's not really a decision. It's kind of work comes after those little things, right? It's not like, oh, I got to give up work to do this. I drop them off in the morning, and then I think about work.
I think, as high performers or entrepreneurs and, a lot of our listeners are in the earlier stages of entrepreneurship and learning about it and exploring it. But I think it's important for people to think about this, right? And to get intentional with it, because like your Sunday afternoon dinners, like, your son's 14 years old or whatever, and he doesn't understand it or get it or care about it as much now. He'll look back on that and cherish that, right? As he matures and gets older. But you have to get intentional about setting these rhythms and these habits, or they get left by the wayside, right?
Yeah.
And so, we're always on to the next thing, or always trying to grow and personally and professionally. But I've just seen it time and time again, like people, that are further along in the journey have taught me that, hey, I spend way too much time at work, and I sacrificed my relationships, and now I'm having to play catch up, right? Or trying to mend these broken relationships. That's not what it's about, I don't think. Personally.
Yeah. There's a book called I think it's called Living Forward, that I read, and a bunch of sort of peers of mine have read. And it's about how, it's basically about what's your life plan, right? And how does work support your life? How does your profession and what you do for work support that? Same thing. Like, is it about how much time is it taking? How much money do you need? But the idea of like, it gave me the ability to understand, what did I want? Like, do I want a $5 million company? Or do I want a $10 million company? Like, the revenue thing didn't really make sense to me. It wasn't an accessible concept for me to think of how I want to grow my company, because I just didn't. Okay, what does a $10 million company look? What does a $20 million company look like? Like, I don't know. But doing that life plan and kind of thinking about, what are all the other important things in life, and how does work support those, it was a good exercise to go through. And I think everyone who in this peer group that I learned about this book from also found it a great way to kind of just give them context to answer their business questions that was grounded much more in a full life and their life goals.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's good. And it definitely, you do need to plan not just business goals, but life goals, like you're saying, right? And break it down. For me, I break it down into my faith, my family, my health, my finances, and my business, right? And then some other things, community and travel, right? And so everyone's interests are different, and they should be tailored to yours interest and how you prioritize your life. But get intentional, think big, write it down, and work backwards. I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that. Speaking of kind of this holistic approach, the show's called Legacy Builders. I'm curious as to how you define legacy personally, like what your definition of legacy is, and then what do you want your legacy to be after you've gone?
Yeah, it's a big question. I mean, oftentimes I think of, even though I started my company completely different than my dad. My dad passed away 22 years ago, and it was, 2 years before I really actually, the reason why I kicked off my company was because he got sick, and I did take over a project for him, but basically started it from my company from a seed. It wasn't like I took over anything he did, and I'm doing it, quite different. But there is some legacy. My dad was an architect and a contractor. I'm an architect and a contractor. We're working in the same area. We're doing kind of similar types of work, but we're doing it very differently. I work very much with clients. Mine's about client service. His was more about kind of development, right? So there's that definition of legacy of like, that I'm doing the same thing, or even maybe a similar type of a company. I think what resonates more with me, and when I think of my three boys, I started having kids later in life. I'm not going to last long enough for them to really probably take over my company, because they would have to take it over at 25 years old or something like that. And nobody's going to hire a 25-year-old who's, an architect and a contract. It's just, and nobody's going to work for him either. I've seen that happen a couple of times where a young, kid takes over a company and they're relatively young and kind of, the people that have worked there end up leaving and kind of have to restart the whole thing anyway. But I think, so one of the things my dad said, we call it on his deathbed, right? As he was in his last sort of weeks, was that he feels like there wasn't a day that in his life where he wasn't doing something that he wanted to do, meaning like he kind of created his own path. And yeah, he worked for clients he didn't want to work for. He had stuck on projects, but like he determined his own direction as kind of an entrepreneur. And I feel that resonated with me then. And I've talked about that since, right? And thinking about how, but I'm going to be able to say the same thing, right? And I feel that's pretty great. And if my kids can kind of figure out whatever their path is, my older son is insanely obsessed with volleyball right now. And if he can kind of create, some sort of a career, whether it's coaching or playing or, being a club owner or something like that, that he's able to say he did that, that to me would probably be my definition of legacy, is really that, it's just, not having to feel like, oh, I've got to go get a job. I don't know what kind of job it is. I don't really care. Just, like that it's more about self-determination might be what I would say.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is really like a mindset and mentality and belief of freedom, right? And to be free to live your life on your own rules or standards or however. And I think it's important that, everyone's is a little bit different. And just because we're entrepreneurs and that's how we think and that's how we were raised, you can have a life of freedom and to do what you want working for somebody.
Absolutely.
Like, there's a ton of people that are living a truly fulfilled, abundant life. And it's not their business. Their name's not on the company or, the head of it.
For one thing, hunting for what you eat is a really hard way to go through professional life. 100%. It is so hard. It's so stressful. And it's that low level stress that's always there.
Yeah.
And I've said for 20 years, I've said, God, wouldn't it be easier just to go work for somebody else and punch, Yeah. It doesn't mean I'm not committed to whatever job I have and it really fulfills me, but I can just turn it off and I don't have to worry about, oh my God, looking at the pipeline. I'm looking at the pipeline calendar and like, are we going to be able to get that project permitted before we need to start construction? Like, so yeah, I totally agree with you. It's not about entrepreneurship. It's just about sort of self-determination and the freedom that we're lucky enough to have to be able to do that. And so, with of course, lots of nuance to that. Some people, some people aren't able to do that, but.
Right. And if you're not passionate about it, like my business is the most passionate thing about it. Like I like to hunt, I like to fish, I like to golf. I have other things, but like when I really sit back and do some self-reflection, like besides my faith and my family, what am I most passionate about? It's 100% my business. Like I love it. I want to grow it. I want to, get better. I want to do different things. And like, that's where my mind goes. But if you don't have that, like the stress will eat you alive. And if you're not truly passionate about it, like you want it, you can't have someone want it for you. Right. And so that would be a tremendous legacy. And I also have three boys, much younger, 3, 2, and 9 months. But I think about that as well. And I think if, we as parents or fathers can instill enough confidence and work ethic into our children, then they will find what they're passionate about and lean in. And if it's our business, sweet, that would be cool, but if not,
Yep.
okay.
Yep, exactly.
What, again, I mentioned that, a lot of younger entrepreneurs or not necessarily younger, early entrepreneurs are listening to the show. What's one piece of advice and one book recommendation that you would give the listeners?
Yeah, I mean, the living forward, I think, is a good one. That's not, again, it's definitely related to business, but it's not. It's about sort of taking your mind out of the business, right, and kind of creating this life plan, and then how does the business serve your life? I've read so many books, and they all kind of blend together. Let me work on the book thing.
Living forward could be the book. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Although there's so many good ones. I think, there's a lot of pieces of wisdom I've gained over the years. I think I'll kind of double down on one of the things I said before, which is really kind of defining. I do think, to your point and what you brought up, the relational and transactional thing is a key to success, right? Trying to be relational in whatever you do as a business transaction is going to lead to success. I mean, look, who was it? The new guy, is it Starbucks? What was the one? Yeah, Starbucks. I think they just re-coached all of their people like last month to just eye contact. Hey, how are you? Write something on the cup. Like, that's relational, right? They're doing it at this billion, multi-billion-dollar corporate level. It's just like, try and be relational, right? And it is a transaction. You're buying coffee. It's everywhere. And if that's the key to success, then I found the way that we can be relational is to be very clear about the transaction we're doing. Mm-hmm. And so not have that come up to the forefront, right? So in that example I brought up earlier about the change order, it's like, if we know that, like, my team knows that if we feel any culpability, we just waive our markup, right? And that's the transaction that we feel like we've already taken care of that. That's in our process. And then nobody has to roll up to me and say, "Hey, boss, can we waive the markup?" They know that this is what it means to be generous to the client. And yeah, we're not going to do it on every change order, but when we feel like there's some culpability, so then you can lead with that relational, because you've kind of taken care of your internal process of the transaction. So I think basically to sum that up, it's like, really own what you do well, mm-hmm. and instill that and make the processes about that, so that when you deal with the client, you don't have to explain to them what you do, right? It's not about the transaction. It's about this is who we are, and this is how we're going to help you. And then it can be relational. Again, it's really hard. It takes a lot of years, a lot of trial and error, a lot of tough conversations that you do wrong and realize that, hey, I probably should have said that differently. But I think that's the key, is being relational within these transactions that we do in business.
Yeah, it's really good advice. And it's something that, we as humans, we want to see a direct result from something. And oftentimes you may never even understand the goodwill you've gained by treating someone right. You might have lost money, right, on this transaction, but 3, 4, 5 years down the road, you got a client, you never even realized they came from that person, right? And it could be someone that was a 10x client, that led to 10 more, right? So, this idea of the ripple effect, right? Doing good for good reasons, not for something in return, right? And That's what I'm hearing there. Well, Jason, this has been an awesome conversation. It's a pleasure to get to know you and hear a little bit about your story. I know that someone out there is going to get some value from something that you shared. If people want to get a hold of you or reach out and get to know you more, how can they get a hold of you?
So you can email me, Jason, at AT6DB. So AT, the number 6DB is in designbuild.com. Happy, Kyle. Appreciate the opportunity. It was a great conversation as well. And happy to answer any questions anyone has. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll put a link to Jason's email in the show notes.
Again, thank you all for listening. Remember, your legacy is built one day at a time. Keep getting after it and making something happen. Have a great day.